Hello and welcome to our presentation on violence in youth. We are Group 3, Darlene Peterson, Kim Schaefer, and Georgette Osting. This is done as part of a class project for Rowan University. The objectives of our presentation today are to define youth violence and describe the different types that may be experienced. We're going to show the prevalence of youth violence through statistics. We're also going to explain the consequences of youth violence and why this is a significant health issue. We're going to explain how to identify students at risk for violence or who have been exposed to violence. And we're going to explain the referral process for students involved in violence. Lastly, we will provide information on youth violence prevention strategies, programs, and resources. So what is youth violence? The Centers for Disease Control define youth violence as the intentional use of physical force or power to threaten or harm others by young people ages 10 to 24. It usually involves young people hurting their peers. It includes the young person as the victim, offender, or witness. There's different types. There's fights, bullying, cyberbullying, threats with weapons, and gang-related violence. It's also connected to other forms of violence, including child abuse and neglect, teen dating violence, adult intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and suicide. So there are 5 types of youth violence. There's bullying, and you can see there what is included under that. There's cyberbullying, which is relatively new with the advent and widespread use of social media. It's a form of bullying that occurs online through text messages, emails, social media, and gaming websites. And individuals can share embarrassing, mean, or damaging content about others. There's fights, gang violence, and also use of weapons. So this conceptual framework of school violence and bullying was adapted from Behind the Numbers. It was put out by the United Nations. And you can see that there are 3 kind of realms of violence: physical violence, psychological violence, and sexual violence. And you can see there where they all kind of converge and into bullying, sexual harassment, coercion, unwanted sexual touching, and rape, including attempted rape. So some statistics from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Homicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for young people ages 10 to 24. Each day, about 14 young people are victims of homicide, and about 1,300 are treated in emergency rooms for non-fatal assault-related injuries. And 20%, 1 in 5 high school students reported being bullied on school property in the last year, and 1 in 7 were electronically bullied, either by texting, Instagram, Facebook, or other social media. So what are the consequences of youth violence? Physical injury or death, development of anxiety, depression, PTSD, other mental health disorders, suicide, engaging in high-risk behaviors, substance abuse, sexual behaviors, alcohol abuse, smoking, increased academic difficulties, school dropout, and it also increases the risk of future violence perpetration and or victimization. So in this figure you can see the blue are the percentages of students who are not bullied in the past 30 days versus in red students who were bullied in the past 30 days. And this comes out from the United Nations again. So you can see that current alcohol use, that's the 3rd one from the bottom, 18.6% of not bullied students versus 30.3% of bullied students were using alcohol. That's one of the biggest ones. Early sexual intercourse, seriously considered attempting suicide. So you can see here that bullying does have a very real and measurable effect. So what as staff members should we be looking for to see if our students are at risk, like who is at risk. So attention deficit, hyperactivity, conduct disorder, or other behavioral disorders. If they've shown a history of aggressive behavior, if they have high emotional distress or emotional problems, involvement in crime, early involvement with alcohol, drugs, or tobacco, a lower intelligence, poor academic achievement, a decreased commitment to school, and exposure to violence or conflict in the family. So as you get to know these kids, you can start to see the ones that are at risk. So what's our referral process? What should we do? So every school has a discipline plan. You want to notify the administrator. You want to follow that school discipline plan. You also want to notify the parents and guardians of all involved students, and who that falls to is usually the administrator. You also want to refer the affected students to the school counselor or other mental health school staff, and you need to refer students to the school nurse if injuries occur. So how can we prevent youth violence? There's some evidence-based strategies here. You can read through them. They range from building children and adolescent skills and competencies to choose nonviolent safe behaviors. You can improve and sustain a safe physical environment in communities and create spaces to strengthen social relationships. And even there's things that are kind of higher level, like changing the societal norms about the acceptability of violence and willingness to intervene. So the prevention strategies range from these big macro strategies to small strategies, things that we as educators can do. Fostering safe, stable, nurturing relationships between young people and their parents and caregivers, and building and maintaining positive relationships between young people and caring adults in their community. And it's important to remember that we are those caring adults in the community. So, the positive relations we form with these young people can go a long way to preventing youth violence. So the United Nations and UNESCO's global report findings show that the prevalence of school violence and evidence from case studies showed factors that contributed to reducing school violence. So there were 6 countries, you can see them listed there, that have reduced levels of violence, and 2 countries have low levels of violence over time. And the common factors were identified, and these findings can shape the development of school practices. So the factors that were identified in countries with reduced or low prevalence of school violence, they were promoting the safe and positive school climate and classroom environment. They empowered children and encouraged them to participate in prevention efforts. They also involved the whole school community. They included students, teachers, school staff, parents, and local authorities. They provided training and ongoing support for teachers. And they also were effective in reporting and monitoring violence. And then they provided support and referral for students affected by violence. And they also enabled students to seek support from school personnel. All right, school and classroom-based prevention programs. So studies have shown that these programs can be effective in reducing aggressive behavior, including bullying and other risky behaviors associated with youth violence. These programs help youth develop skills to prevent violence and engage in healthy behaviors. So there's some example programs listed here: the Good Behavior Game, life skills training, promoting alternative thinking strategies, and steps to respect. So some classroom strategies for our teachers. You need to develop and post clear rules for behavior. You have to be consistent with giving negative consequences for breaking rules. You need to use cooperative learning techniques to build positive peer relationships, and also promote and reward positive student behaviors. You also want to increase student monitoring and supervision, and you can reduce bullying by involving parents and caregivers. And you want to develop positive and trusting relationships with students through effective communication. So what is school connectedness? This is the perception by students that they are being cared for by school personnel. There's positive relationships within the school climate, and they're comfortable to talk to an adult within the school about a problem. And research shows that this may play a significant role in preventing school violence. Students who feel connected to school personnel engage in fewer disruptive and oppositional behaviors. They experience more stable social, emotional well-being and have higher academic achievement. And students are more likely to seek assistance from teachers they trust. So you can see that this school connectedness not only is good for students who are at risk of being bullied, but it also helps students who are at risk of doing the bullying. As you can see that, if they're connected to school personnel, students engage in fewer disruptive and oppositional behaviors. So here's a list of a few resources if you wanted to look more into this. There's the Striving to Reduce Youth Violence Everywhere. The website is there. There's also the National Bullying Prevention Center, the National School Safety Center, and stopbullying.gov. Here's our list of references, and we have these available if you wanted to look further into them. And we also have a handout for staff that contains our referral process and some tips for keeping bullying out of your classroom. So thank you very much for sitting with us during this presentation. This marks the end of it. Have a good day.